They say life is about relationships, that you need people around you always, that the more friends you have, the happier you'll be. But what if that's not true after a certain age? What if after 70, happiness isn't about surrounding yourself with others, but finally feeling free to just be yourself? Free from pressure, free from expectations, free from the noise. You see, there comes a moment in life, usually later than we expect, when we stop needing to perform. We stop needing to belong to every group, attend every event, and keep up with every friend we've ever had. And in that quiet shift, something powerful happens. We start to realize that solitude is not the same as loneliness. In fact, solitude might just be the key to living the most peaceful, meaningful years of our lives. My name is Harold Whitman. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a guru. But I've spent 42 years working alongside older adults, listening, learning, and walking this road of aging myself. From hospitals to front porches, from support groups to long, quiet walks, I've seen one truth rise above all the others. The happiest people over 70 are not the ones with the biggest social circles. They're the ones who've learned to let go. Let go of friendships that no longer serve them. Let go of the guilt that comes with saying no. Let go of the outdated idea that being alone means something is wrong with you. In this video, we're going to explore 6 deeply personal, research-supported reasons why you may not need friends after 70 and why that might be the most liberating realization of your life. But let me be clear from the start, this isn't about cutting people off. It's about letting go of the weight you've been carrying. The obligations, the performative conversations, the half-hearted gatherings, and rediscovering who you are when the noise quiets down. And by the time we reach the 6th reason, I promise you something inside you will shift. You may even feel like a burden has been lifted. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just understand why fewer friendships can mean more joy. You'll feel it. You'll know it in your bones, and you'll be ready to embrace this next chapter of life on your terms. Let's begin. You no longer have anything to prove. There's something remarkably freeing about turning 70. For decades, most of us lived under a quiet pressure to fit in, to keep up, to prove our value. Whether we were raising families, building careers, or showing up for our communities, the unspoken message was always, be worthy. So we did. We dressed the part. We played nice. We showed up even when we didn't want to. But now at this age, that performance ends. You no longer need to impress anyone. You no longer need to chase approval. Because you've lived. You've earned your place in the world. Not through noise or numbers, but through time, through endurance, through every quiet sacrifice you made that no one else saw. And at this stage, your worth is not up for debate. You know who you are. You don't need someone to tell you you're kind. You've proven it through decades of care. You don't need a crowd to applaud your life. Your story is written in the hearts of those who matter most. And you certainly don't need a dozen acquaintances to validate your identity. Take a moment and think of someone like Harold, a man I met during my years leading group sessions for retired professionals. He was once the face of a major corporation, suits, boardrooms, networking events, and name recognition in his industry. But when retirement came, so did the silence. Colleagues stopped calling, holiday cards stopped arriving, his phone stayed quiet. At first, Harold tried to keep those connections alive. He sent emails, extended invitations, checked in, but nothing came back. And one day he stopped trying, not out of spite, out of clarity. Because the truth hit him, those people were never really friends. They were coworkers, convenience companions, temporary travel partners through a busy season of life. So Harold stepped away, and what he found was something unexpected. Relief. No more empty conversations, no more shallow exchanges. Just space. Room to think, room to feel, room to live life without needing someone else's approval. When we finally accept that we don't have anything left to prove, we begin to live differently, more slowly, more softly, more truthfully. Because that's what freedom really is, the absence of obligation. So if you found yourself pulling away from old social groups, resisting the urge to explain yourself or make people understand, you're not being cold. You're being wise. And that wisdom says, you are enough just as you are. Peace becomes more valuable than socializing. There comes a point in life, and for many it happens right around 70, when noise starts to lose its charm. We begin to see that constant connection, while once exciting, is now exhausting. In our younger years, we filled our days with people. Meetings, parties, coffee catch-ups, family dinners, church potlucks, neighborhood events. There was always a reason to go, always a voice calling for our time. And in many ways, it served us. We built relationships. We shared laughter. We found support. But over time, that need for connection begins to shift. Not disappear, shift. Because now peace is what we're after. Not popularity, not attention, just peace. It's the deep exhale that comes from a quiet morning. It's the stillness of a soft chair and a good book. It's the joy of hearing your own thoughts without interruption. Take Margaret, for instance. She's 74 now, and for most of her life, she was the social glue in her community. She knew everyone. She coordinated gatherings, remembered birthdays, sent handwritten cards for every occasion. But a few years ago, she noticed something. These social interactions no longer energized her. They drained her. She'd return from lunches feeling tired. Group chats gave her headaches. Phone calls dragged on longer than she wanted. So Margaret made a change. She didn't announce it. She didn't explain herself. She simply started saying no. And something beautiful happened. She found space to walk in the mornings without checking her calendar. Space to listen to classical music without reaching for her phone. Space to be still. And in that stillness, peace returned. It wasn't isolation, it was restoration. Here's the truth. Not every friendship is restful. Some people bring warmth, others bring drama. Some conversations lift your spirit, others drain it dry. As we age, we begin to recognize the difference. And when we do, we start choosing differently. We start asking, does this add peace to my life, or does it steal it? And when the answer is the latter, we begin the quiet work of releasing, of letting go, not because we're angry, but because we're tired of holding on. Because peace is no longer a luxury. It's a necessity. And the more we protect it, the better we feel. So if your phone rings and you hesitate to answer, if an invitation arrives and your first thought is dread, listen to that. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is simply not go. Fewer friendships mean fewer disappointments. There's a quiet truth many people only learn with age. The people you poured your heart into won't always pour it back. And for decades, that hurts. You forgive, you make excuses, you say they're just busy or they didn't mean to forget. But by the time you reach your 70s, that tolerance starts to wear thin. You've given too much, waited too long, and accepted too little. And you begin to see things more clearly than ever before. That friend who never returned your call. That cousin who only calls when they need something. That neighbor who disappears when you're the one needing help. They were never really there for you. They were there for the version of you that served them. Take William, a retired Navy man I met at a community wellness center in Florida. He's 78 now, tall, soft-spoken always, with a fresh-pressed shirt and a polite smile. For most of his adult life, William believed in loyalty. He sent birthday cards on time. He checked in on his friends' families. He kept in touch with people from high school, college, and every job he ever had. But one day, while sitting alone on his porch after sending out his Christmas cards, he had a realization he hadn't received a single one in return. He paused. He thought about every lunch he had initiated, every call he had made, every message he had written, and he asked himself something he'd never asked before. Why am I still trying? That question changed everything. William didn't stop caring. He stopped chasing. He stopped feeling guilty for letting those one-sided relationships fade. And in return, he gained something better than false connection: peace of mind. Here's what most people won't tell you. When you reduce your circle, you also reduce your stress. You stop waiting. You stop wondering. You stop hoping people will become who you always wish they'd be. Because when you have fewer friendships, you can finally focus on the few that matter. The ones that fill your cup, not empty it. The ones where silence is just as comfortable as conversation. And when you stop trying to keep every door open, you realize that not all of them led to anything anyway. So if you're tired of reaching out first, if your calls go unanswered, if your efforts feel invisible, maybe it's not you. Maybe it's simply time to stop pouring into cups that never pour back. Because the truth is, fewer friendships don't mean you're losing love. They mean you're finally saving it for the people and the peace that truly deserve it. Your time becomes more precious with age. When you're young, time feels endless. You spend it like pocket change, tossing it toward late-night conversations, weekend trips you don't remember, and people you barely know. And that's okay. That's what youth is for. But something shifts after 70. Time begins to feel different. It's no longer just something to fill, it becomes something to protect. Every morning feels a little more sacred. Every afternoon nap becomes an act of self-care. Every evening is a chance to breathe, not to impress. You stop saying yes out of guilt. You stop showing up just because you feel like you should, and you start asking yourself a much deeper question: is this how I want to spend the time I have left? Richard asked himself that exact question at 82. He'd always been the kind of man people depended on: a loyal friend, the first one to show up, the last one to leave. For decades, his phone never stopped ringing. His calendar was packed, but he began to notice a pattern. Every call felt a little more draining. Every lunch date was filled with small talk and complaints. And after each gathering, he came home tired, not just physically, but emotionally. So he stopped. Not because he didn't care, but because he started caring about his own well-being more. He replaced meetings with mornings on his porch. He traded loud restaurants for quiet walks by the lake. He let unread messages stay unread and didn't feel bad about it. And for the first time in years, Richard felt truly alive. Here's the truth so many of us avoid. When you hit your 70s, 80s, and beyond, time is no longer something you manage, it's something you honor. And honoring time means saying no without guilt. Saying yes only when it feels like joy. And no longer wasting hours trying to meet expectations you've outgrown. There's a beauty in choosing stillness, in not rushing, in not explaining, in not proving. And when you begin to live by that rhythm, something amazing happens. You start to feel young again, not because your body turns back the clock, but because your spirit finally stops running. So ask yourself next time someone asks for your time, does this feed my soul or just fill my schedule? Because after 70, every hour is golden, and you deserve to spend each one exactly how you want. True companionship comes from within. There's a common belief that happiness in old age depends on how many people you still have around you. But here's a question. Most don't ask, what if the best company is your own? We live in a culture that often equates being alone with being lonely. Especially in later life, there's pressure, subtle but steady, to stay connected, stay active, stay social. But for many people past 70, something beautiful begins to happen when the world quiets down. You finally meet yourself, not the version of you that was busy raising kids, not the one who was juggling work, caregiving, or community duties, but the real you, the one who's been quietly waiting for stillness all along. Eleanor, a 76-year-old woman I met at a senior wellness retreat, described it perfectly. She told me that for most of her life, she feared being alone. She scheduled lunches, volunteered, called friends weekly, and filled every weekend with plans. And yet she still felt empty, not unloved, but uncentered. Then one winter, she caught the flu and had to cancel everything for 3 weeks. No visitors, no obligations. Just time with herself. And at first it was uncomfortable. The silence felt loud. The stillness felt strange. But slowly, it became soothing. She drank tea by the window. She started journaling. She walked through her neighborhood in the early mornings, just listening to the birds, to the breeze, to her own thoughts. And for the first time in her adult life, she felt full. Not because someone else filled her up, but because she finally realized she was enough. Here's what the world rarely tells you. Being comfortable in your own company is a skill, a gift, and a sign of true emotional maturity. You don't need constant interaction to feel valued. You don't need a phone that rings or a full calendar to feel important. You simply need a sense of peace, the kind that comes when you stop searching outside yourself for joy. The kind that comes when you realize you don't need someone else to complete you. You are already whole. That doesn't mean you stop loving others. It doesn't mean you become cold or disconnected. It means you stop depending on others to give you something they were never meant to provide: your own inner calm. And here's the irony. The moment you truly enjoy being alone, you start attracting better connections. People who respect your pace. People who meet you where you are not where they want you to be. People who see the light in you because you see it in yourself. So if you've been worrying that fewer friends means something is wrong, remember this. There is no emptiness in self-contentment. There is only freedom. And that kind of companionship, the kind that starts within, will never leave you. Letting go opens the door to a more fulfilling life. There's something deeply misunderstood about aging. People assume that growing older means holding on tighter to traditions, to routines, to relationships. But the truth is, the opposite is often more powerful. Letting go is what sets you free. It frees your mind. It frees your heart. And most importantly, it frees your time and energy for the things that matter most. After 70, life has a different rhythm. You've spent decades being loyal, responsible, consistent. You've kept friendships alive out of habit, showed up to gatherings out of duty, and maintained relationships that no longer bring you joy, all because it's what you were taught to do. But just because something has been part of your life for a long time doesn't mean it still belongs there. James is a perfect example of this shift. At 79, James was still trying to live like he did at 59. He stayed active in the community. He kept a long list of social commitments. He always answered when people called, even if he didn't feel like talking. But one afternoon, after leaving a brunch that felt more like a chore than a joy, he sat in his car for 15 minutes just staring at the dashboard. He wasn't sad. He wasn't angry. He was simply tired. Tired of showing up when his heart wasn't in it. Tired of conversations that went nowhere. tired of pretending that everything still served him the way it used to. So he made a decision. He let go. He stopped saying yes out of fear. He stopped keeping up appearances. He stopped confusing busyness with fulfillment. And in that space, in that quiet, intentional choice, James discovered something he hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Freedom to wake up without obligation. Freedom to focus on his health. Freedom to spend his days in nature with his dog, with his thoughts with peace. He didn't shut the world out. He simply chose to live in it, on his own terms. Letting go isn't abandonment, it's alignment. It's asking yourself, does this still reflect who I am today? Not who I was at 40 or 60, but who I am now in this season of life. And if the answer is no, you have the right to release it. Because life after 70 isn't about proving you're still young. It's about honoring the wisdom that came with age. And wisdom says this: you don't need to chase people to have a meaningful life. You don't need a crowd to feel complete. You don't need noise to feel alive. You just need truth. Your truth. And that truth often begins to emerge when you let go of guilt, of outdated expectations, and of relationships that no longer nourish your soul. Because when you create space, joy finds its way in. And it looks different now. It's quieter. It's slower. But it's deeper because it's yours. Reflections, takeaways, and a call to live fully on your own terms. Let's take a breath together, a deep one. Because if you've made it this far, you've probably felt something stir inside you. Maybe it was a memory, a recent moment of silence that felt surprisingly peaceful, or maybe just a quiet thought that whispered, it's okay to let go. That whisper, that's wisdom speaking. Let's be clear. This video was never about telling you to live in isolation. It wasn't about pushing people away. And it definitely wasn't about giving up on love, friendship, or connection. It was about giving you permission. Permission to stop pretending. To stop saying yes when your heart says no. To stop chasing friendships that left you emotionally overdrawn like a bank account that kept charging fees with nothing left to give. Because here's what I've learned in over 4 decades of walking alongside older adults as a caregiver, a guide, a friend, and now as one of you, fulfillment doesn't come from what you keep, it comes from what you release. And when you let go of expectations that exhaust you, conversations that drain you, social obligations that serve your guilt, not your joy, you begin to uncover something rare. Stillness that soothes your soul, time that actually belongs to you, peace that doesn't require anyone else to provide it, and that, my friend, is real wealth. Not money, not a crowded holiday table, not 100 Facebook friends, but the calm assurance that your life, exactly as it is enough. Now let's bring it back to you. You've likely walked through friendships that faded without warning. You've probably experienced the sharp sting of being forgotten or overlooked, and you've almost certainly wrestled with the guilt of choosing peace over people. But maybe now it makes more sense. Maybe now you see that not every loss is a loss. Sometimes it's space being made for rest, for joy, for you. So let me ask, what relationship are you still maintaining out of obligation? What invitation do you keep accepting just to avoid guilt? And what would your days look like if you said yes only when you truly meant it? This isn't selfishness. It's self-respect. It's the hard-earned right of a life well lived. Because after everything you've done, given, survived, and endured, you owe no one an explanation for choosing yourself. Let me leave you with this. Some people will call it loneliness, but you'll know better. You'll know that stillness can be sacred, that peace can be powerful, that fewer friends can mean more freedom. And most of all, you'll know that happiness after 70 isn't about how many people are around you. It's about how deeply you enjoy the person you've become. So choose peace. Choose quiet. Choose truth. Choose you. Now it's your turn. I want to hear from you truly. What part of today's message spoke to you most? Have you experienced the shift from needing others to finally being content with your own company? Have you let go of any relationships that no longer serve your peace? If so, I invite you to scroll down and leave a comment below. Tell us one thing you've learned and one way you plan to reclaim your time and energy going forward. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this video brought you comfort, insight, or maybe just a quiet sigh of relief, please take a moment to click, share this with a friend who needs it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. We're building a community here not based on noise or numbers, but on truth, peace, and support for this chapter of life. Because aging isn't a decline, it's a refinement. And the more we share, the more we all grow. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you truly for being exactly who you are. We'll see you in the next video.